Hey, what's up, guys? Benji here, just doing a question of the week. So, my question of the week this week is, um, what was that? I think I just covered it. Oh, what's the best decision that you've ever made in your life? Um, and I don't know how most people would answer this question, but I feel like uh, I don't really know. Um, but here's what I'm going to say. So, I think the best decision of my life was starting lastminute golfer.com. I think from there, my life kind of changed. I think before that, I was selling cell phones, and then I was working at RSUs selling sandpaper and glue and adhesives and things like that. And then while at RSUs, I got the idea to start Last Minute Golfer, and then I got Mark Dieter involved, and I got Bob Houston involved to kind of run these other cities in essence. We had Kansas City, St. Louis, and Omaha. But I think the reason why I would call it the best decision of my life is that it got me to understand because it was actually kind of crazy, right? I was probably 27 years old, and I had this harebrained idea that I was going to start online tea times that nobody else was doing. I mean, besides, I mean, I just came up with it some night in a bar, but after doing a little bit of search on the internet, which wasn't that good in 2000, right? The internet was still so young, which was why that service was still available at the time. But there were like three or four other guys doing it in these random cities in Atlanta, and the guy up east, the guy out west, and that was really about it. I mean, there were these teeny tiny little players kind of all over the place. But um, the thing that it did is that it let me know or opened my eyes to the idea that if you have a good idea and you kind of believe in yourself, that for one, you can go get money, right? I mean, it was so crazy to me that we convinced, I forget how many people, probably eight or nine people to put money up for this idea. Everybody's putting in five to 20,000, right? I think now maybe 15,000. I think my dad put in 15,000. But besides that, that was all that ever happened. I mean, we never, took on more money or did anything else. Back then, you just raised enough money to get the thing off the ground, and then it had to kind of fly on its own. Where nowadays, and 10 years later after that, yeah, you raised your initial seed round or angel round, and then you went for a Series A, and then a B, and those rounds are 5 million and 12 million because you're going to go nationwide and worldwide and all this stuff, and half of them don't work, just not way more than half. 95% of them don't work, and it's just all a bunch of wasted money, and probably because the thing got too conflated, got too fat, got too big. But it was eye-opening to think that as a 27-year-old kid, you could convince full-grown men that were 45, 50 years old. They're like, hey, yeah, give me 10,000. I got this good idea. We're going to try to make this into, and try to get you 50 grand out of your 10 here in 5 years. And we did that, right? It was a great ride the whole time. It kind of sucked that it was a short ride. Um, Comcast ended up buying it out, but I think what it did is it opened up my eyes to the idea that when you work for yourself, you can make so much more money. So before that point, I was mostly thinking, boy, I need to sell more widgets. Right? I got to sell more sandpaper or tape or adhesives or cell phones or whatever I'm selling. I got to sell more so I can make incrementally more money. But as that happened and you started to see, now that was a software company, we were making 85%, net profit. So that was always good. I mean, our expenses were some advertising, and then the rest of the money went to me and Bob and Mark. So it was it was a such an interesting time, such an interesting project to take on, but it was a real world project and had real world outcomes, and so there was money coming in. There was In Kansas City, we made $30,000 a month. In St. Louis, we made $40,000 a month. Omaha was probably doing 10 or 15, something around there. Um, Probably closer to 10, I think, 10 or 12. But that was real money. I mean, that was really happening, and um, such a neat project. And so then what it allowed me to do to go, hey, you should start another business. Like now, right after that, I did go work. I went and worked for Illustratus, a newsletter thing. Now I met Nick and Zach and some guys that are still friends. Probably mostly Nick, but Nick got me. I got him to go join Wolf Creek, um, which he ended up loving. And then he met a lot of good friends, and I met friends through him. And so, it wasn't a bad thing at the end of the day. It ended up being a good thing for me and friends and financially and all that kind of good stuff. But I went back to that company after working for myself, and I was like, oh my god, the amount of just slowness and waste and ridiculousness of larger companies is awful. I mean, that's the only way you can say it. It's just wasteful. We had at that company I went and worked at, that newsletter company that was doing newsletters for retirement communities. So it's mostly doing it for um, the kids of people that are in retirement homes or nursing homes, that kind of thing, assisted living facilities. And we had five, six, so we had six direct full time reps who each had an assistant of their own. So 12, let's call it. And then a whole pod of people that were supposed to be cold calling and taking in incoming calls of like 30 more people. That job could have been done by three people. Um, and those people would have been busy and probably would have made good money and it'd been a good thing. Maybe five. Let's call it five. Let's call it five with an admin. That would have been plenty. But it just got you to show that. So you all of a sudden I started looking at business differently. Start looking at the inefficiencies that happen, and inefficiencies is an opportunity for a smaller, you know, how I've always said it, is a boat to come along, right? So a big, huge company is a cruise ship, and they just don't turn very fast. They don't make very quick maneuvers. They can't do that. They just can't turn. It's too big of a beast. But you can be a medium sized company that's a 40-foot boat and you can kind of turn all over the place. Now, you can be a one or two man shop and find this tiny little niche and you're in a little wave runner and you can do 360s and do whatever you want all the time because you have this tiny budget and tiny scope. And so it makes things incredible. So, that being said, Last Minute Golfer was a great win financially for me and my family. But I think it led to the other businesses that happened that maybe weren't that good, but that were fine. Um, you know, um, some consulting things for golf courses, some marketing consulting jobs for random businesses, and then eventually into me going, man, there's a hardscape niche here that is super easy. Like if you can build these things, if you can put patios in, there's a lot of people that want this and there's not a lot of people that do it. And for one, it takes a lot of money to buy all the equipment to do it, right? There's a reason why people become painters and lawn care companies is because you need a mower, a trailer, and a truck. Or a painter, you need a paintbrush and a roller, right? But to be a hardscape company, even with one crew, I mean, you got to go buy a $45,000 mini skid steer. You'd love to have a $80,000 full size skid steer. You might need a little mini excavator for another 30 grand. And it would be great if you're doing any concrete at all to have a concrete buggy that costs another 15 to 20. Not to mention, you need an F-250 or a 2500 Chevy or GMC truck that's a diesel that can haul 10 to 15,000 pounds, and a trailer that has 7,000 pound axles on it, two of them that can carry this stuff. Next thing you know, you're $150,000 into one crew. And it sounds miserable, and it is, but it does produce a moat around a business and everybody and their brother deciding to jump in and try to start it. So back to the question of what was the most important decision or the best decision I ever made. It wasn't really to start Last Minute Golfer because it has nothing to do with Last Minute Golfer. It has to do with the best thing that I ever did was start a business of my own. And you're accountable for everything, but you also get the rewards of everything if you're smart and can do things right in your work. And I think all the smartest people I know, they own their own business, right? They control their own destiny. There's just not a lot of people that make it and have substantial success working for somebody else. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. My brother-in-law Dave Vannegut is a perfect example. He's an attorney and worked as an attorney for a law firm, and then went to work for a large construction company that does, I don't even know, $10 billion a year, and he's general counsel. And I don't know what Dave makes, but my guess is he makes $500,000 to $1 million a year at this point. He's a C-suite level executive, and that happens, but there's just not very many of those, right? If that company that he works for, Hewitt, and I have no idea how many people they employ, if they have 10,000 of them, there are 100 that make killer livings and have an awesome lifestyle. But those people also don't control their own day like the guy that, right? I mean, my brother-in-law has an incredible life. Would I trade Dave's life working for a big, huge multinational conglomerate construction company versus a guy that has a lawn and landscape business that does $8 to $12 million a year, and that guy takes home 700 grand? Oh my, yeah. Give me the little landscape company that makes it. Give me Dusty Farrell and his dad and his grandfather's business of Ted's Trash that does $15 million, and I have no idea what those guys make, but there are three generations and multiple kids and grandkids that are employed there that are in big, huge houses and have boats that are $250,000 and classic cars that are 100 grand. They're not classic cars that are 15 or 20 grand. So again, I think it could be done other ways. I think you can go work for a big, huge company and eventually move up. But I think that's a lot of stress and it's a lot of pressure. I think being the guy, right? There's a guy that I'm following right now that, he, there's two guys actually that do it. That they have these tiny little companies. One's doing stump grinding, and he works for himself, right? And he makes $250,000 a year. He just goes around and grinds stumps, and I love that business. And there's another guy that does bookkeeping, which I'm kind of trying to get Sierra going on some of that stuff. And that guy is making, um, you know, 40 to $50,000 in profit. He's making $500,000 to 600,000, and he's got 100 clients that he does bookkeeping work for and charges $500 a month. But all of that money is his own, right? So you can make 45 grand and be like, yeah, I made 600 grand last year. How often do you work? Yeah, I work 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, and nothing's high stress, nothing's crazy. You're matching up bank transactions. So I think there are so many ways, and I think that's what opens a person's eyes to it. And then I hope that I get that into my kids' eyes and anybody I come across, nephews and nieces, that you want to really make money and you want to really have a good life, go open a small business and figure out how to personally make $200,000, because that's a good living right now. Now grow that, turn that into 300 or 400 or 500 if you want, but you don't have to. And they don't take they don't take a ton of work. So opening your own business is the best thing that a person can do, and the best thing that changes a person's life is in my opinion. Of course, having family and friends around and doing things you love, those are great. But I think the one decision I made that was great was starting a business and then knowing, hey, you can actually start these things and they work, and they're great and they'll change your life and they'll change your family. So that's my answer.